Hello and welcome to Star Wars Breaking Canon, a podcast where we break down and analyze each live-action entry in the Star Wars universe, from the original trilogy to The Mandalorian and beyond. I'm James Callahan.
I'm Joseph McCorkle.
And I'm Julius Freeman.
And on today's episode, we're discussing 1999's Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, written and directed by George Lucas. Julius, why don't you start us off? Tell me about your first experience seeing this film, your memory of when the film came out. Were you plugged into the hype?
Oh, yeah, man. I was totally plugged into Star Wars at that point. I was a senior in high school, and I was dating a girl who knew I was a Star Wars fan and thought I was the biggest nerd of all time, at the time, because she had never, dated or knew anyone who liked or enjoyed Star Wars as much as I did. So, which is surprising that she actually even decided to give me a shot, but that's a whole different story right there. but she was the one who actually told me. She called me on the weekend, almost like a year prior, because I met her in my sophomore year, and she told me, "You need to watch this movie because there's a trailer I think you're gonna love." And I was like, "What was that?" It's a Star Wars trailer, and I was like, "You mean like the old one?" He said, "No, a new one." I was like, "What?" And I hadn't plugged into the whole behind the scenes stuff, so I didn't know he was producing a prequel. So I freaking got there and paid my ticket, watched the trailer, and I was like, "Okay, I'm in." So when the movie came out, May, forgot the date. It was May though, right?
Right. Yes, I think it was maybe May 19th.
May 19th. I actually ditched school that day. I got ready at home, told my mom, "I love you, I'll see you later." And she thought I went to school, but in actuality, I took the bus and I took a reroute. And I ended up at the South Coast Metro Point, and I hung out there until it was time for them to open, and I bought my ticket and I watched the movie, and I didn't go to school that day. So I had actually skipped school for the first time in my life just to watch Episode 1, The Phantom Menace.
Was it worth it?
Oh, hell yeah, it was worth it. Are you kidding me? It was worth having to, fake my sick letter and then fake my mom's signature and give it to my teacher and be like, "Hey, sorry, I wasn't feeling good." But in reality, I was eating popcorn, drinking soda, and watching Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon kicking some ass in the first, half of that movie. But yeah, that was my first experience with the Phantom Menace, was that I actually did something bad to watch something great. And I still like the Phantom Menace to this day. I know a lot of people give a lot of flack, but that's one. Episode 1 is the only one from the prequels that I actually enjoy the most because of how he was still, I guess he still had some semblance of old Star Wars within himself, which is what came out on the screen. I still have some problems with it, but they're small, little, minute problems, not big ones where it ruins the movie for me. Because overall, I thought it's exactly the way I wanted Star Wars to be. And when I watched it again recently, it was like, yeah, this still holds up. Like, it hasn't aged. It's not bad. I mean, of course, there's a little moments here that I recognize, even when I watched it in the theater, because I had watched it 12 times in the theater after that.
I'm sorry, you saw it how many times?
12 times that summer.
Wow. 12 times.
Yeah, but at 12th time, I knew the lines. I knew exactly what was going to happen. I didn't care because it was Star Wars. Like you said, it was the first Star Wars movie within my lifetime, a new one.
Right.
That I can watch and say, I was there. I saw it 12 times. And I was initiated into the Star Wars geekdom by doing that. But that was my first experience with Episode 1.
Joseph, we're about the same age.
Yeah.
I know that we didn't necessarily have the luxury of getting to a multiplex to see movies over and over again. And I think your experience might be a little similar to mine. Can you tell me about where you were at in 99, your level of hype leading into the release of the movie and your experience with it?
Yes. The summer of 99. It was, Episode 1 was just a huge cultural event that really made a huge splash. I'm kind of contrasting it to today, where Star Wars seems to be everywhere. It's just ubiquitous, but we're almost maybe a little jaded about it. I mean, that was the first movie since 1983. People had hugely high expectations. I remember Anakin's face and Qui-Gon's face and, yes, Jar Jar's face just all over everything, Pepsi cans, and
Yeah.
Taco Bell was just all decked out. And there was massive anticipation. I'd been watching the trailer. That was like a cultural event just on its own when that came out. So going into seeing the movie, I saw it in theaters, and I think I was just blown away to like Julia said, be a part of this cultural event and the anticipation, and then getting to see the film. So I saw it once in theaters, and I watched it like another 10 times or so once it came out on video. But yeah, I didn't have the hate, but I think there was this feeling that like this is not exactly the same as like the original trilogy,
Right. That became very apparent once I saw the film, bought all the toys, and couldn't stop talking about it. And I maybe had a conversation with somebody a few years older than me who informed me that I was wrong and that the Phantom Menace was terrible. And how could I have this opinion? I was probably not a real Star Wars fan. So my hype for this film, this is actually ground zero for movie hype for me, because I don't think I even knew how to hype up a movie release before this. I think there were films here and there with actors and maybe even directors that were on my radar. But when I saw Star Wars for the first time in the special edition, I think that like maybe I started purchasing copies of like Star Wars Insider at that point, and they were talking about the Phantom Menace, a solid 2 years before the movie came out. So this movie was very much on my radar for a huge portion of my childhood, which feels like a decade. A year feels like 5 years when you're 12 years old, And so when I first heard that there were going to be new Star Wars movies, I was disappointed when I found out that they were going to be prequels, because I wanted to know about the continuing adventures of Luke, Leia, and Han. But at the same time, more Star Wars felt like, that what could be better than that, right? I wanted as much Star Wars as I could possibly get, especially if it was a movie version of Star Wars. And so I have these vivid memories of collecting Pepsi cans and collecting the Pogs that they had at KFC and Taco Bell and Pizza Hut. Yeah. Yeah, they were a little behind the curve on that with the Pogs. Pogs were dead and done at that point, but they brought them back for one.
Remember Alf? He's back in pug form.
Yeah. But yeah, so when the Phantom Menace came out, I think at that point I had saved up quite a healthy allowance, over the course of several months, and I just bought everything. I bought every toy. I bought every book. I bought every kind of marketing tie-in that I could find. My entire room was just like decked out in Phantom Menace stuff, I think even before the movie came out. So I loved the movie before I saw the movie. And once I saw the movie, it was just an excuse to be able to talk about it at that point. And so, I mean, at a certain point, seeing the film was just sort of kind of an afterthought, and it didn't even really matter whether the movie was good or not. And I think there was a sense that I had when I saw the film that, yeah, this doesn't really feel like the original trilogy at all. And it sort of developed this reaction and this backlash very quickly of people, I think, this general like misconception that the movie was supposed to be a certain thing and it wasn't that thing for the people that saw it. And so like the thing that I continue to that continues to fascinate me about this movie, maybe even more so than any of the prequels, this being, the first proper Star Wars movie in over 15 years and Lucas's first directorial effort in 22 years, how much of the Phantom Menace's reputation is affected by irrational overanalyzation and just I think this misconception that Star Wars The Phantom Menace should have been Return of the Jedi Part 2, or it should have been a continuation of that same tone, that same vibe, that same kind of feel.
Yeah, I can see it hurting the franchise overall, because you're right. It was a different feel to what the original trilogy presented to us, back in the 80s. And a lot of that had to do was because there was other people involved in the creative process with George Lucas. So George was just kind of like, I'm writing the story. here's, I'm going to give it to these people and they're going to develop it for me. And then I'm going to say, yes, I like that. No, I don't like that. Let's keep this. Let's change that. And I think that's what made Star Wars what it is, because it wasn't the factor of too many cooks. It was the factor of the right amount of cooks in the kitchen to make this, this trilogy great. And so with this one, he got rid of that. He wrote the screenplay. He's going to direct it. So now he's in charge of the creative direction of it. Whereas before he allowed people to kind of do it himself, and he would say, "Oh, I like that. Oh, let's change this and whatnot." And I think the backlash, like you mentioned, came from that. We're creatures of habit, right? American cinema moviegoers are people who like. We say we want new stuff, right? But in reality, we really don't. Deep down, we want something that looks recognizable and new. So I think that's what happened. George Lucas wanted to present it in a certain way, and the fan base, the hardcore fan base, and including the casual fan base, I guess you could say, they had an expectation in mind because they wanted to see what they recognized already, which was in the original trilogy. And then when we got Phantom Menace with all this new technology, sleeker CGI, special effects, no Empire, so there's that. And it was like, I could see how I felt flat for a lot of people. It didn't fall flat for me because in previous podcasts or episodes, I talked about how much I love the Jedi and how much I want to see more of the Jedi. So this was exciting for me to finally see what the Jedi used to be like when they're at their peak of their power. And that's what I was excited about. I didn't care about aesthetics. I didn't care about if it looked like the original trilogy. I knew it wasn't going to look like the original trilogy when I came into it because of being of the awareness of the progress of the CGI special effects in movies. So I knew it was going to be totally different.
And also a different era.
But a different era, exactly. And so I personally did not let that bother me, but I could see how people were bothered by that. And I think it did have an effect on the film. But I think mainly it was due to the fact that the execution of the film or the story didn't hit in my, overall. It didn't hit. It didn't capture that same like satisfying ending, like a satisfaction by the end of the movie. It was kind of like, all right, sweet.
Yeah, I mean, it's look, Lucas made like a creative choice that he wasn't gonna just make Return of the Jedi Part 2 or something like that. He was significantly expanding this universe, and I think he did it really, really well, actually. But we can see now with the sequels what happens when you just kind of remix a lot of familiar elements. It doesn't really hit with people either. It kind of just turns into a big smudge. So I think Lucas just ran into those huge expectations, and it had mixed results.
Yeah, I see. Watching the film this time, and this is a movie that I've seen many times, and I think over the course of like my adulthood, early adulthood, my 20s, this was a movie that I did not put on very often. You can't really put this movie on with a girlfriend or with friends and have, a situation where they still respect you afterwards. So this film always felt like, especially through my 20s, like, kind of like a childhood friend that only you love, but everyone else is like, I hate that guy. Don't bring that guy around. That guy refuses to grow up. Yeah. And so I think that with this film, I kind of had accepted that, it's a bad movie, but it's one that I love. But over the last few years, after, revisiting it numerous times, I've started to approach this film on its own terms. Instead of comparing it to anything else, but just looking at it as like, Lucas could have made any movie that he wanted to make. He bankrolled this film. He wrote and directed it. This is completely of his mind. So you have to take the movie at face value. This is what he intended to make. There are so many movies that are disappointing because, the filmmaker had one idea of what they were making, but by the end of it, it was a completely different movie. This was one where you don't have that excuse. This is exactly the film that Lucas intended. And I kind of think that's where you start to appreciate this film, and you start to appreciate the prequels in general. Another thing, and this is kind of the basis on this podcast, is the idea of how you should engage with these films and how you should absorb them. And I think The Phantom Menace is a great example of why you shouldn't start with this film when you're rewatching the movies or when you're introducing them to somebody. Because first of all, if you watch The Phantom Menace first, there's a very good chance you'll never watch another Star Wars movie. And I understand that. I can sympathize with that. But also, I think that The Phantom Menace and the prequels in general are more enjoyable when you engage with them and how they build off of Return of the Jedi. In a lot of ways, Return of the Jedi perfectly sets up The Phantom Menace. Return of the Jedi saves, the original trilogy saves Palpatine for the very end for Return of the Jedi. That's right, where he's introduced. Yeah. And then you see The Phantom Menace, and one of the first characters you get is Palpatine. He's introduced as the big bad. And it's kind of this interesting thing where you've got the previous film, which is like part 6, setting up the prequels in a way that, even though Lucas says that you should watch these movies from 1 through 6, I really don't think that's the way to engage with these movies, because it makes a whole lot more sense to take what you've learned in Return of the Jedi and then take that back to the beginning to understand how Palpatine pulled this off. And I think that that's something that is lost on a lot of people, that while all of our heroes have big wins in this movie, and they will continue in Attack of the Clones and throughout a lot of Revenge of the Sith, if you're paying attention to the background and you're paying attention to Palpatine's machinations, it actually turns out that every time the heroes win, they actually lose because Palpatine amasses more power. And that's where I think these movies become a lot more interesting, is when you see them through the perspective of Palpatine, basically.
Yeah, he's really interesting because every time you see him in a scene, he's being presented as like an ally. For the most part, like when he's hanging out with like Amidala, in the Clone Wars, like there's a lot of moments where he's working directly with the Jedi, but of course the whole time he's just organizing every aspect of this downfall. It's a really interesting thought, the way you said that to consider Palpatine's character arc almost happening in order from Return of the Jedi, next step, the prequels, because it's kind of like you see him at his end, and then it's like, this is the story of how this happened. He's always pulling a string. He's always kind of orchestrating everything that's going on from the big to the small.
Right. And you said that, kind of the way that he's working on the surface to help the Jedi, to help Amidala, to help the Republic, he's also Sidious, obviously. And it's weird to me watching the movie now and thinking back to when I first saw it, that there was even a question that Sidious and Palpatine might not be the same person, because the way this film sets that up, it's sort of like an in-movie mystery that, are these the same person? I mean, obviously they are, but why is this kind of being hidden from the audience? Why are we not getting anything sort of behind the scenes? And I do think that was a choice that Lucas made on purpose. And yeah, I don't know. It's a really interesting choice that he made to do that.
See, you're being a little nice there, James. You say it's an interesting choice. I say it was a terrible choice.
Okay.
Because at this point, George Lucas should have known better to not, I guess, I don't want to say insult the audience, because I don't think he did that. But to kind of hint that they could or could not be the same person, when in reality it's like, dude, we know it's the prequels. It's the damn story about how Darth Vader becomes Darth Vader. And yes, you're showing us the progress of how Palpatine, kind of snuck in through the cracks of the Republic, and then usurped his power and then grew it and became, Emperor Palpatine. I felt that maybe what he could have done is, instead of showing him in the movie, like, Darth Sidious speaking to the Trade Federation aliens, forget the names.
The Neomodians.
Thank you. And maybe instead of showing him, with the projection, maybe we could have heard his voice instead, or something where it's a bit more like mysterious, as opposed to in your face, like, wow, look at this, guys, this is Emperor, Palpatine, but when he wasn't Emperor yet. And that's the one things, like I mentioned earlier in the intro. One of the little nitpicking things that I noticed, that kind of like, I kind of wish he did that differently as opposed to what he did in this one. But once again, I accepted it. I accepted it because, like, you know what? fuck it, this is the Phantom Menace. Damn it, I've been waiting for almost a year for this movie. I want to watch it. I'm going to enjoy it, and I did. So I think that personally, to conclude, he could have chosen a better way to present that to the audience, especially the Star Wars audience who like at that point in 1999 almost were like almost like students of the game, right? They knew about Star Wars, they know about the universe, they knew the characters' names, they knew all the backstories that are outside the film trilogy, with novels, because there's a bunch of novels that have been produced at that point, novels, comic books. So I think he kind of underestimated the knowledge that his audience had of his mythology, which was Star Wars.
Well, and famously, back when in the lead up to the release of the Phantom Menace, I believe that the Star Wars expanded universe, the novels that were starting to come out, I think that began with Heir to the Empire. That was the early 90s. And so you have about 10 years of books that are released, and none of them are allowed to touch anything that came before A New Hope. Like Lucas said, all of that was off limits. And so, yeah, I remember when I saw the Phantom Menace for the first time, and, seeing Darth Sidious in that projection and actually hearing the Emperor's throne room music, you're automatically like, oh, well, that's Palpatine. But the fact that he has a different name, and the fact that we don't see Palpatine put a hood on before he gets on his little projection to talk to Newt Gunray, it kind of creates this question of like, are they the same person? Are they two different people? Are they twins? I mean, who knows? So yeah. But you know what? Not to get too far ahead of ourselves with Palpatine, because he's going to come up a lot over the next few episodes. I want to go back to the start of this film, and basically the choice that Lucas made to set this film in the era that he did, at the point that he did. For many years, I have maintained this belief that the biggest misstep of the prequels was setting the Phantom Menace this far back in the past, and us being introduced to Anakin as a boy and as a different actor than the actor who would play him in Attack of the Clones. I still maintain that was a mistake, but at the same time, I was trying to figure out what Lucas's intent was with this, and I think that ultimately it comes down to this. I think he wants to present Darth Vader as a child who's innocent and who has a mom, because the idea is basically every bad guy used to be an innocent kid, and every bad guy has a mom. And so it was very important to show us him at his most innocent before he becomes corrupted in any way. I think it will really weigh down the trilogy as it goes along, but that was a choice. That was the choice that he made.
Yeah, I remember back then I kind of thought more like having Anakin at the age of like maybe like 13 would be more ideal, and having it be more of like him getting directly into Jedi stuff in whatever his first episode would be. But watching it again, I would say, it was a choice. And I think Anakin in Phantom Menace got some shit from fans, but to be honest, I think he's pretty charming, and he's definitely like innocent, and there's a lot of like pathos with his character. I thought like the scene where Shmi sends him off is actually like really, it's a deep character moment, and it's like it's got a lot of like force feeling wisdom kind of in that scene, and it's not like it could have been a lot worse. And then we get that kind of more like young adult Anakin in the next two, obviously. So it's a choice, and it could have been different, but Lucas sells it. I feel like there's a lot of like quality filmmaking in Anakin's arc here in this first episode.
Julius, I promised myself that I wouldn't try to remake the Phantom Menace during this podcast, but I'm going to throw something at you. Tell me what you think about this. What if Liam Neeson played Obi-Wan and Ewan McGregor played Anakin? Think about the chemistry between Ewan McGregor and Natalie Portman, and how that becomes less creepy and weird and very strange, and suddenly actually kind of works dramatically.
It could. It could, but
I mean, it requires a page one rewrite of
yeah,
this
oh
whole
yeah,
thing.
absolutely,
but yeah.
absolutely, yeah, for sure, 100%. But wow, I never even thought of that.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where I've thought for years, like, what if Anakin was older? What if it was the same actor across 3 films? What if it was a better actor across 3 films? I'm happy with the movie that we have now. I've come to terms with it, but I do, when I watch it and I look at somebody like Liam Neeson, who is, I think, pretty fantastic in this movie, you know, given the material that he had to work with. And I think that in a lot of ways, Ewan McGregor is completely underused in this movie in a way that feels just perplexing. I don't understand it. I don't understand why there's 2 Jedi in this, you know, aside from the fact that that's just part of how the Jedi work. It just seems like it kind of holds the film back in a way. But again, I understand that this is what Lucas was going for. I do wonder how much more successful from a storytelling perspective would this film and this prequel trilogy have been if the Clone Wars started in the Phantom Menace and if Attack of the Clones had been a Clone Wars film. And I think that, you know, we've talked about this before on episodes that may never actually get released. But yeah, it's definitely one of those things that I think it's interesting to think about. I don't like the idea of remaking this movie with, a roundtable discussion among friends who just want to shit on it. Right. But it is, when you look at the pieces and the components that are actually there and you just rearrange those pieces, you could see a better film, and so that's kind of like this interesting tug of war that I have with this movie that I really admire and that I really like. But I'm also like, oh my God, like, it was, the pieces were there. If you just reassembled them, you could have had a better film.
I was one of those who did not like the casting of Jake Lloyd, not because of the actor, it's just because I thought the character was too young.
Yeah. It's not Jake Lloyd's fault.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's not. Jake Lloyd was innocent in all this because he was a child. His mom and dad probably took him to the audition. He killed it. He got cast. It is what it is. But I'm talking about the character Anakin at that age, and I understand that Lucas wanted to convey the idea that this character that ended up being one of the most evil characters in cinema history. Was innocent, like you said, innocent and young, had a mother and whatnot. I just wish he could have been a little older, maybe 11 or 12. How old was he in the movie? Was he 8?
It's supposed to be 9.
Okay, 9. So I wish he was 11 or 12 because that's the age where you're about to hit the teenage years and you're still 1 foot in the adolescence and 1 foot in the teenage years. And I thought that perhaps if Anakin was still loving towards his mother and also still very innocent, but showed signs of like his renegade, side that we see in episode 2 and 3.
Right. So going back to where this movie starts, basically, setting the stage, and also I think clearing up another issue that a lot of people have with this film that I've never really understood, which is the fact that this movie is bogged down in the politics of the galaxy, which to me is actually really interesting. And I've always thought it was interesting. I thought, maybe I'm stupid if I admit that it's interesting, but I'm going all in. I think it's actually very compelling where we start. I think the roll up is a little dense. I could understand, if you're a 10-year-old kid seeing Star Wars and you find out that, turmoil has engulfed the Galactic Republic because the taxation of trade routes are in dispute. You're like, what the fuck am I watching? And so I kind of get that. But I was thinking about this while watching the movie, and I think we're introduced to the Republic kind of at the end of its glory. It's definitely seen better days, and it's about to fall completely into utter chaos and dysfunction. And I was thinking about just what's revealed in that roll-up. The fact that the Chancellor, independent from the Senate, secretly sends the Jedi to the Trade Federation to negotiate with them. So basically, the Republic is supposed to be peaceful, yet they have this sort of like, this dominance over the galaxy. They don't have an army, but they allow the Trade Federation to have an army. And the Chancellor isn't really supposed to go behind the Senate's back to dispatch Jedi to go negotiate with the Trade Federation. It creates this kind of interesting dysfunction where you basically have the Chancellor, who doesn't have a lot of power, who's going to the Jedi, and it implies that the Jedi kind of already have, some issues that they have going on with the Senate. And this is all stuff that's sort of like barely suggested in the movie, but having watched these movies so many times, I'm trying to get to the bottom of why I find this so fascinating. Is this something that you guys have thought about at all? Joseph, what do you think about this?
Yeah. Have you ever watched a movie where there's a lot of like implied plot, and then when you work it out on your own, you're like, wait a minute, this doesn't really make sense.
Yeah.
Like I feel like that's one of the saving graces of the prequels, is that in the films they use these really broad strokes, and it leaves a lot to the imagination, or in Star Wars's case, the expanded universe. But really, they're kind of staking out like like large dynamics in this universe that other authors and other TV shows and other expanded media can play around in, and it works. And it builds a world that implies like a lot of depth and endless stories that you can tell in that universe. Lucas is kind of the guy just like staking out, this is the contours of the politics of this universe, and it works.
Julius, what's your take on the politics?
I love it. Sci-fi tropes, they always reflect what's going on in the real world, and that's the like, I don't want to say the secret, but that's the ingredient that a lot of sci-fi authors use to write their magnum opus of whatever it is that they decide to write. And Lucas is no different. Since Lucas is a sci-fi fan, it makes sense that he would implement political intrigue within his space opera. That's the whole point, right? So
right.
I dug it. I was 17, senior high school. Believe it or not, I actually was a political nerd too, on top of Star Wars nerd. So I did really well in my government and my government classes and my current event classes, because I always loved reading the newspaper. I always liked to know what was going on in the world. And ever since, oddly enough, not to go off track, but ever since 1992, that's when I started getting interested in politics.
Wow, that's impressive.
It's weird. I don't know what it was. I don't know what it is. It's just it's one of those things that it just sucked me in. I just like the whole theater of politics, even from a young age. So secretly I would watch C-SPAN at home.
Weird.
But I would never share that stuff with my friends, because my friends would, of course, when you're growing up, you don't want your friends to think you're
right
weird. So I would just keep that to myself. So it was one of those things for me growing up. So by 1999, I liked the hate to that. It was like, cool, this is actually a nice element to, and plus it's Star Wars, because in the original trilogy, it was still political in a lot of ways. It's just the only difference is it was a rebellion fighting against an oppressive empire, whereas this is the fall of a free republic.
Yeah, it was still concerning. It was still concerning politics, but it was kind of at the 1984 stage.
Exactly. There you go. Right there.
Which there's definitely not a lot of examples of that in cinema, where you have this huge world, this whole universe that is a organized society of people that is governed and kind of relates to the world that we live in now. When you think of science fiction in cinema terms, you think more of like, oh, we're going to go out into space and explore, not like, oh, we're going to go out and we're completely colonized and we've gotten to the point where now we have like, cantinas on desert planets, and we've got planets that are outside of the jurisdiction of the Republic that allows slavery for some reason. I mean, there's so many really interesting things going on in this film that it's weird to me, like you said earlier, Julius, that people say they want something new and they want something original, but then when they get it, they freak out because it turns out they really just want something familiar. They want you to kind of reheat their leftovers for them, and
exactly.
Maybe even chew it for them too.
Yeah, reheat their leftovers, but add like maybe a new side dish.
Yeah, side. Maybe. Yeah, make it sort of new. Right. Sure. So I find it really interesting with where we begin. We have our Jedi, Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon. They arrive on the starship, and then immediately Newt Gunray calls out to Sidious, who I guess didn't know that the Chancellor was going to send these Jedi. He immediately says, "Okay, this is unfortunate. Kill the Jedi, invade Naboo." And this is like a huge deal, basically. Before that happens, though, and we're introduced to Qui-Gon, I think it's worth pointing out that the Jedi, really shockingly enough for me, and I think for a lot of people, are portrayed as these narrow-minded and incompetent fools throughout the course of this trilogy. And they're not, we don't quite get there yet. We'll get there in the middle of the film when we go to Coruscant and we meet the Jedi Council. But Qui-Gon is kind of introduced as somebody who's a lot more open-minded. He's more interested in the gray area, and he's immediately coming in with ideas of being open-minded and looking at all sides before just falling down onto one perspective. And one of the things that I think that's very strong about this film is the character of Qui-Gon Jinn. And what tell me a little bit about your perspective on, Qui-Gon basically being the first major Jedi that we follow in this saga when taken, 1 through 9.
Yeah, he adds a lot to the Star Wars universe. He seems like that Jedi that you're kind of imagining when you see the original trilogy, and like the Old Republic is kind of just a whisper. Like you imagine these like wise warrior sages, and Liam Neeson's performance is great and just adds like a lot of texture to the Star Wars universe. He does like to play in that gray area though, doesn't he? Like I was kind of thinking like he must be just like going throughout his day just like force tricking people left and right. Like he's just always kind of waving a hand. He's like, oh, I'll just like just make that die tumble the way I want it, and like I'll just trick you, and like you're gonna do what I say, and like let me grab this speeder here and just
I love the fact that he obviously has a code and he trusts in the Force, but when he wants something, he's kind of willing to throw some Force in there to make things go his way, which is pretty interesting. And I wonder what the Council really thinks about him. What are your thoughts on Qui-Gon, Julius?
I like the character too. I just wish they would have used a Jedi that maybe they mentioned in the original trilogy. I mean, in the original trilogy, Obi-Wan does say that Yoda was his master, his trainer, and I understand why Lucas did it, because it probably would have been annoying to try to have Yoda and Obi-Wan together in adventures. The CGI Yoda running around with with Obi-Wan. So.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting, because in the original trilogy, like Jedi seem a lot more like monolithic. Like each one seems like a much bigger deal,
right?
And they're talking about a clear history, like the conversations in Empire and Return of the Jedi, where like it seems like there was Yoda and Obi-Wan were hanging out back in the day, and it's like, who's this where is this Qui-Gon guy coming from?
Yeah, exactly.
Although it may have been weird if Obi-Wan were to appear to Luke on Hoth and would say like, I'm going to have you meet the guy who trained me my early years. There's this guy named Qui-Gon who trained me like later on, but you're going to die from hypothermia. So just look, find Yoda. He's going to trade you. He's a good guy. Okay. Another thing that's introduced in the opening scenes is we have a military. And it kind of reminds us a little bit of the Empire, the Trade Federation. They're kind of like a proto-Empire. And we're introduced to battle droids who look pretty imposing when you first see them until they start talking. And then you realize that they're cartoon characters that basically fall apart like sticks. And I think this is something, the machinery of war. And we were talking, in previous episodes about how a lot of these organizations rule by fear, but when you actually test them, they're incompetent and they fall apart. The Ewoks defeating the stormtroopers and Return of the Jedi being an example. I do really love this idea of Lucas creating an entire military that is based on battle droids and destroyer droids and these huge starships and everything, and how much it kind of does pave the way for what comes in the future installments. What was your take on the Trade Federation?
Incompetent. That's the only thing I could think of. Incompetent machines. I don't know. I guess you could say I just simply accepted it for what they were, and I understood why Lucas chose droids, because I don't think he liked the idea, or he probably didn't want to introduce the idea that Jedi kill people, because they just in that first sequence when they're penetrating the Trade Federation's ship, they're like destroying machines left and right with their
right.
lightsabers. So I can imagine, like, oh my god, can you imagine those were like soldiers, like Jedi massacring a bunch of people, to get to the.
Yeah, you know what? I did not think about that. That's really funny. That absolutely has to be the reason why, because it would have been
Yeah.
unsettling to just have a bunch of
Oh,
limbs
very
everywhere.
unsettling. It's like, yeah, exactly. You're like, oh my god, the Jedi were peaceful,
I've been watching a lot of Clone Wars lately, and it's such a smart choice to make them droids because you just have endless battles where the Jedi get to show off their skills with no moral quandary, like
right. Yeah, exactly. And so I just accepted it because I knew, I said, okay, Lucas chose robots because that's the only way he could show off the Jedi's crazy cool skills by having them destroy a bunch of robots, which worked for me. As for the Trade Federation, yeah, talk about incompetent fools. Like they're just what do you call it? Yellow belly freaking aliens that are just like, oh, I don't know what we should do. We should contact Star Studios, see what we do next. And
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel maybe if Lucas would have written them a bit more competent, a bit more confident in their power, then I would have believed that them being a force of reckoning to the Republic. But they didn't. They were kind of like puppets, as we find out later in the movie. They're just puppets.
Yeah, sure.
Being pushed around by Darth Sidious.
Basically, yes. Which leads me to wonder, and going back to what I mentioned before about the Republic not really having an army, does the Republic have any real power at all? Like, how could they allow this Trade Federation to have an army that can go out and enforce its will across the galaxy, sort of independent from the Republic? Was this something you thought about at all, Joseph? Like, you're watching Clone Wars, and I know like this kind of thing comes up with like the different organizations that are independent from the Republic. They get pissed off and they start the separatist army and all of that. And
it seems like it is a nod to the Roman Republic, which obviously this overall story parallels that a lot. Back then it was like you raised an army, and in times of peace you wouldn't maintain an army because it was kind of like a show of force, right? And it's
right.
It's really like a very idealistic idea of government, compared to where we're at today.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that like the voice of the battle droids is like kind of hilarious. Like,
oh yeah, absolutely.
Like they are just like at least in terms of like what they're saying, they're very like befuddled and like incompetence. Like, why would you make droids like this?
Right.
Going back to what I was saying before, that if you accept this film at face value and engage with it more on what the director's intent was as opposed to what you think it should have been, they're really funny in that context. But also it's also funny to imagine adult fanboys losing their shit because these battle droids aren't believable as a formidable force against the Jedi. But it is really funny to see them sort of like bumbling their way through situations. And I love the battle droids. I think the design of them is great. I love the destroyer droids. I mean, they look expensive. There's got to be a reason they're not deploying, a full battalion of destroyer droids, because they can do a lot of damage.
Yeah, totally.
From my studies of Plato and other philosophers who wrote about republics, typically, ideally speaking, anyway, republics don't ever enforce themselves on anyone else. It's always an invite. Hey, we have this cool thing here. It's a system that's been working for us. Do you want to join this system? Do you want to join this Commonwealth? So that way we can grow together. And a lot of the time, it's always voluntarily. It's always voluntary when they have other countries conglomerate and join together in this republic, because a republic is typically a commonwealth. So the breakdown of the word republic is pretty much our riches or something like that. Res and then public. Wow. So the res is like our, or like I think res is our or gold, not gold, wealth or something like that. I think that's what it was. And then public obviously is the public. So it's essentially, it breaks down to the public's wealth, and everyone benefits from it. It's all voluntary. There's no enforcement. So I think the reason why Lucas had the Republic with no armies, because typically there is no army in republics. It's essentially you're supposed to defend your own property. You arm yourselves, or there's a class of quote unquote guardians or warriors that are just born and bred to be warriors, and that's your pretty much your voluntary protective class. So maybe that's what the Jedi was in Star Wars, in the world of Star Wars, where you had the Republic, which is all voluntary. They invited other systems to join this system, and then it got so big, too big maybe, and it imploded on itself because of maybe they got too comfortable, perhaps.
God damn it, Julius, you're making me like this movie more. Guys, Jar Jar Binks.
Oh,
Yeah.
So there's this character named Jar Jar Binks that is introduced once the Jedi make it to Naboo, and this is one of the things in the Phantom Menace that I can't sort of like explain away. This just seems like when you have an army of yes men and no one taps you on the shoulder to tell you, hey, this isn't a good idea. This is what you end up getting. And a lot of people say that about the Phantom Menace in general, but really I think what they're talking about is this character. I don't think this character is an abomination like people make him out to be, but I don't think he belongs in this movie, and I don't think he should have had this big of a role. Julius, give me your nuanced opinion of Jar Jar Binks.
Oh my God, annoying. I understand. Once again, I understand why George Lucas did it, because he needed to replace C-3PO. He needed that comedic relief replaced because it was gone. There's no C-3PO in the prequels up until halfway through the movie, and he's like practically a newborn, and symbolically speaking. So I understand why he added Jar Jar Binks. He needed to fill that void, but it just felt flat, completely flat on his face, because it was just tone deaf.
Yes. Joseph, what do you think about Jar Jar Binks? I mean, we've lived with this character now for over 2 decades, and I've known you for a long time. I don't think you've ever liked this character. What do you think about him now?
Okay, rewatching this film, I just had the thought that, probably a majority, like a solid 2/3 of the total backlash to this film is directly because, like, in the first minutes of this movie, this like friggin' like rubber like vaguely racist character just shows up on the screen over emoting like crazy and being like, hi, I'm Poochie, it's just look, you know what, this was, in 1999 it was revolutionary to have like an all CGI character, and there was a lot of hard work behind this character, and like learning more about storytelling and understanding that like you want to have kind of like a stand-in for the audience, and you want to have a character that, at least in these Star Wars movies, like one of the functions that C-3PO does is like he kind of like emotes for the audience, and like Jar Jar does a lot of that. And I think if you're like a 5-year-old, like it works. Like he has that kind of like, over expressive emotional thing, but like they just didn't nail it, like the voice of him, it just comes off, it like gets you in some kind of like weird, like reptilian brain kind of like, it's not quite the uncanny valley, but it's just like, it's just, he's just unpleasant.
Yeah. It's irritating.
But like he's irritating for sure. And especially at the beginning, like his character actually kind of works in the third act. But it just, this is like a brick wall right at the beginning, and it taints the reception of the film, like it or not.
It is really, it's one of those things where I feel like all it really, like I said, would have taken was just the right person to tap him on the shoulder and explain why this is not a good idea. Yeah. You can keep the same actor, and you can keep the same character design. Just dial it down. Yeah. Anyways, we can move on from Jar Jar. He might come up a little bit later in the demerit section. Okay, so we get to the point where when we leave Naboo, we travel to Tatooine, and we're at about 40 minutes into this film. And I cannot believe how much plot we have been given in just the span of the first act of this movie. This movie is loaded with material. And Joseph, you mentioned earlier that sometimes when you unpack a movie's plot after watching it, you realize there's not a lot there. With this movie, he basically shoved about 3 hours of plot into a 2-hour movie. It's really it's almost like another complaint I can give towards this film is that you pause the movie at a point that you think you're halfway or 2/3 of the way through, and you're actually only a half hour in because there's just so much going on. It's kind of exhausting.
Yeah. I was that's one of the things that I found so interesting on this rewatch is that this movie has like just a constant rhythm to it. There's like this really interesting rhythm of like just there everything is a beat, and there's just beat after beat after beat, and there's never like 3 or 5 seconds where there's not something happening. And like all of this plot is just being wound into these actions very very seamlessly, where like a lot of things are just happening boom 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 boom, and there's like a lot of really deft storytelling happening.
Do you find the pacing exhausting at all, Julius?
No, it's I've always liked George Lucas's pacing in his films. Like when you watch THX 1138, and then of course American Graffiti, and then the first Star Wars movie, and then when he found his style, I guess he's kept that going. And with this one, it's no different. The only difference is obviously it's like you said, there's a lot very dense information being crammed into the first act of the film, and it kind of hurts it. I think it harms it a little bit because the audience, they're trying to get everything at once, but there's so much going on. It's kind of, you have to watch it again and again, like I did, right, to understand what was going on. So yeah, I think it did hurt the film a little bit, but not to the point where it ruins it, but enough where it's like it distracts you. You remember, you want to immerse your audience into your world and let them be kind of like this purveyors of like, you know, this awesome world you created, not have them sit there and take them out so they could think about what's going on. Because if you do that, then you ruined the experience.
For me, when I first saw this movie, I distinctly remember my first experience seeing it. I don't think that I was following a lot of the plot, what's happening.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So
but
much.
I never had an issue with following the film. I think that the movie does a great job of kind of always keeping you aware of what's going on. All the pieces on the board, you never forget where you are, you never forget how the characters have progressed. And so, yeah, I mean, and I was pretty young when I first saw it, and, I didn't have any issues with that. But I don't know, it's something that I think about now when I rewatch it, where I'm trying to find, okay, it's very hard for me to be objective about it because I've lived with this film for so long. I've seen it so many times, but trying to pinpoint what the issues that people have with it are, I can see where people might be like just completely exasperated by it within, 45 minutes of the movie. So let's talk about the pod race, because the pod race is thrilling.
Yeah.
I love this pod race. It's one of those things where when I revisit the movie, I'm always reminded, but then I sort of forget. But this is like kind of the centerpiece of Lucas's career. Like his entire career has built up to this pod race because he's so fascinated with these kind of scenes, racing scenes, hot rods and things like that. And I think that like this is just an astounding feat of special effects, of miniatures, of all kinds of stuff. You guys have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think I've heard that like the pod race is has been criticized by some fans where they're like, this technically doesn't have anything to do with the main plot. Like, why are we sidelined here for so long, worrying about, whether this slave gets freed through like this pod race? But that's ridiculous. Okay, this is one of the like this is a great sequence just in cinema,
right?
And especially as we've done our watch through of Lucas's filmography, it's like it's so distinctly Lucas. It's such a distillation of stuff that has been happening since American Graffiti, and it also kind of channels the trench run from A New Hope, and it's just such a showcase of production design where you have all these different wildly different pod race designs, and it's a great showcase of Anakin's like supernatural piloting abilities. He's the only human who can do it. It's like that's such like a kind of mythic status, and we see his bravery where he's at first he's boasting to them that like I'm the only human that can do it, and then you find out that you've never finished a race, and he's like, well, this will be it. We'll do it this time. It works character wise, it works production design wise, and it's just a thrilling piece of cinema. I wanted to note there's a solid 60 seconds at the start of the race where There's just you just see the different pod racers like revving up. And I just thought it was so great that there was like a solid minute of just that. Great choice.
I agree. It expands the universe. It makes it feel so much bigger. And it's just cool to see something that is like, a cultural thing in universe, something that, people go, like, he didn't have the budget to put, all of those, to populate his scenes with all of the different characters and things going on in the original trilogy. And it's just fun to see that. And I mean, to the complaint that it drags the movie, that it slows it down. I mean, does the audience have somewhere else to be? Like, you're watching a Star Wars movie. What are we talking about here?
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. It also establishes the what's going to happen later in the movie when Anakin essentially saves the day.
That's true.
When he takes that,
it's setting that up.
That jet. Well, I don't know what the ship is called.
The droid control ship.
There you go. Yeah. And yeah, that whole sequence, man. That talk about peak Star Wars.
Yeah.
Right. That was it. I was on the edge of my seat throughout the whole sequence, and when I watched it recently, once again, I was like, man, this was really good. Like, this was so well done. You could tell that Lucas put his heart and soul into that sequence. Like that, he paid close attention to make sure that was perfect the way he wanted it, and it came out great. He's a very great, underrated action director, I will say. George Lucas should have focused more on action movies outside of Star Wars if he decided to make other movies outside of Star Wars. Because he just has kind of like the James Cameron touch, where he knows exactly how to present it and do it well and get people, the audience, vested and leaving them at the edge of their seats with every frame.
Yeah,
it was great to see Jabba the Hutt.
Yeah, very true.
And to start the race, that was awesome. I was like, hey, Jabba, sweet, we get to see a young Jabba the Hutt. Awesome, who's not.
Looking a little slim,
stuck on this chair. He actually can move.
Yeah,
looking a little slim.
Yeah, whatever the Hutt version of Peloton is, I think that he was, working it out a little bit. Yeah, again, going back from how this movie sort of builds off the original trilogy and Return of the Jedi, it's fun to see a character that we just saw in Return of the Jedi come back and see him at his most powerful, basically. I love when he bites the head off and he spits it into the little thing that signifies the beginning of the race. Is pretty great. So basically, the tension of the scene, the whole point of the scene is that, and Anakin of course doesn't know this while he's racing, is that he's racing for his freedom. And when he wins the race, he wins his freedom. I think it's really funny that when he is leaving his mom, he turns on C-3PO to say goodbye, and he tells 3PO, I'll make sure mom doesn't sell you. And I think there's this really sad existential moment when you look at 3PO and he says, sell me? When he just suddenly realizes, wait a minute, I'm a slave. I've been programmed to be a slave. It reminds me of, do you guys remember the butter robot in Rick and Morty?
Yes. His sole purpose is just to spread butter.
Yeah.
Yeah, welcome to the club, pal.
Yeah.
So from there, we go to Coruscant, which is, where we really see a lot of the, sort of political dysfunction that's going on in the setting of these prequels. And, we're introduced to the Senate, which is, just in terms of design, production design is just so cool looking. I also love the exterior of the Jedi Council, and the interior of it is really great. I love the idea of like a planet that's just like a huge city with all these, ships going every which way. It really sparked my imagination when I first saw this movie. And I still think it's, remarkable from a design perspective.
Yeah, I was wondering actually, do you know anything about the creation of Coruscant behind the scenes? Like, what had we seen an image of Coruscant before Phantom Menace?
I think in Jedi, the remastered. I think the remastered,
like in the special edition, right?
Yeah, I think we saw it there.
I think that's actually the first appearance.
Was it though? Because I think that was added in future special editions. I could be wrong on that.
Not the 97 one.
I don't know if 97 Return of the Jedi had it. I think that he added that in with the DVD release, but I could be wrong. It's too bad there's no resource out there that we could use to find out.
Some sort of Wikipedia.
But I from my understanding, I believe Timothy Zahn was the one that came up with Coruscant, because Coruscant plays a huge role in Heir to the Empire and then future Star Wars books. And I guess Lucas really liked the name, and he liked the idea of this sort of like, capital planet that that was where he, what he decided to put in the Phantom Menace. So we kind of glossed over the whole, the whole Anakin being the chosen one being based on, first of all, midichlorians, which was a little bit of a controversial subject back when this film came out. Where do you guys fall on the subject of midichlorians?
I really don't care, honestly, one way or another, because the one thing that you have to know about or have to understand, you have to explain stuff to audiences, or else they're not gonna suspend their disbelief. So what is the Force, right? How do you tap into the Force? Is it because of your race? Is it because of your sensitivity to the Force? What exactly gets you connected to the Force, right? So the introduction to midichlorians,
Right,
is something plausible for the audience to go, oh, okay, so the higher level you have of midichlorians, then the more you can wield the Force, or the more likely you can wield the Force. It's almost like it reminds me a little bit of like someone who's naturally gifted in something, right? Or like, oh wow, this person was able to draw, like I just picked up the guitar one day and I started playing, and it just came to me. So things like of that nature, and that's why when they introduced that, I was like, okay, that makes sense.
Joseph, what do you think about midichlorians?
I thought that they still fell flat in this film. They were actually like one of the weakest points of this film. Like there's a scene where Qui-Gon is explaining to Anakin that Jedi live in symbiosis with these midichlorians in their cells, and it's just like it really just is this. It takes the mystery away.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, I can see that.
A Jedi's connection to the Force is implied by like their training and their like devotion to it, right?
So I was actually trying to think of the possibility that the idea of midichlorians are just kind of this like sort of like elitist principle that the Jedi use as gatekeepers to say who gets in and who doesn't. And that actually kind of made me appreciate the idea of that a little bit more, that like maybe they measure your count, and if they don't like your count, and maybe that might be based on what planet you're from or your background, they might decide, no, we don't want to waste our time training you because we don't think you're going to fit in.
Yeah, and that fits in with the whole idea of the Jedi as being out of touch and
right. So, which then going back to being on Coruscant and visiting the Jedi Council, where Qui-Gon, who I think it's really, really kind of funny to consider that you've got Qui-Gon, who's kind of a little bit of an outsider among the Jedi. And maybe this is the reason why they send him on one little mission and he comes back ranting about prophecies and chosen ones and invasions. And they're just like, Jesus Christ, Qui-Gon Jinn, like we gave you one job and you're coming screaming about conspiracies. So I don't know, maybe the council is just, they've gotten sick of this guy. But I was wondering about this prophecy, and the prophecy is very vague in this trilogy. I think it's a weakness of this trilogy, but it also kind of makes me wonder, even though it's not there in the text, even though it's not there in the prequels, I was wondering, like, is the prophecy something that was maybe like incepted into the Jedi by the Sith, like maybe 1,000 years ago, to make them believe it was a good thing, that balance of the Force meant that Jedi would just have all rule and power over the Force, but in actuality it would be their downfall, that the balance would mean sort of like the end of the Jedi Order?
Well, apparently in the Disney canon, Palpatine basically like Force conceives Anakin to fulfill that prophecy and bring the downfall of the Jedi about.
Right. It's actually part of the canon that that Darth Plagueis, who is Palpatine's master, basically, he was the one that created Anakin using the Force, using midichlorians. He created the virgin birth that would happen on Tatooine. So this was sort of like happening a decade before, and it's not in the films. And I guess they were starting to introduce this before Disney acquired Star Wars, but it is still, I guess, part of the canon. They just haven't fully explored how that happened. I guess there was a scene that was written for Revenge of the Sith where Palpatine tells Anakin after he becomes Darth Vader, where he says, well, technically I am your father, in a kind of like switcheroo of the I am your father from the original trilogy. I'm kind of glad that didn't end up in the movie, but yeah, that it is interesting that, that's there and it's sort of hinted at. But it's also kind of funny that the Jedi never actually do their due diligence to figure out, like, hey, is the prophecy a bad thing? They're just like, oh yeah, that prophecy, when it happens, it's going to be great. Balance. Can't wait for that.
I mean, honestly, like, the whole idea of the prophecy leaves more of an impression on some than others. Like, to Qui-Gon, it's super important, but to other people, they're like, I don't care about some old prophecy. Like, we're the Jedi Council. We got shit to do. It would all like an ancient prophecy like that would always be vague. Like, I'm thinking about if like something like that were in the Harry Potter universe or something. It would just be one conjecture among many, and to Qui-Gon, obviously it was important, but to others, they're like, whatever.
Yeah. And it also, going back to Qui-Gon and his obsession with the prophecy, we'll talk more about this when we make our way through Clones and especially through Revenge of the Sith, but it is hinted at that Qui-Gon still exists in some form after he dies. And his insistence that Anakin's the chosen one, that the prophecy is true, and that he must be trained, it kind of makes me wonder, does he have a premonition of this idea that the Jedi Council kind of, and the Jedi Order needs to be destroyed, that it needs to be, basically broken down so something new can be built back up? Because of just how obsessed he is with this happening, it kind of, I don't know, it makes me wonder about his character a little bit and what his real intentions are.
My take is that if it's not on film, it didn't happen.
Of course.
But it's an interesting take, though. That would be very interesting if they did explore that he saw a premonition, a forced premonition where the Jedi Council fell and it needed to happen. Because, yeah, it technically it did bring balance to the Force.
Right.
Because the Jedi, they were essentially, they monopolized the Force at that point. And like you said, they become elitist, almost snobbish. Like, oh, you don't have enough midichlorians, so we're not going to train you. We're not going to bother with you, even though that individual can bring something unique to the table with their Jedi, or their Force abilities. Like the way, which we'll talk about in a future episode, the way Rian Johnson did in The Last Jedi. What Lucas did here was, I think he showcased the audience that the Jedi had lost their way. Even though they were cool and badass and they had all these cool powers, they just didn't, they lost touch with the Force, essentially. What the Force truly meant, which is, it's for everybody. It's not just for people with high level of midichlorians. It's for anyone who's Force sensitive who could tap into it.
Yeah. And I mean, out of the Jedi's dominance and, inability to see past, their strict order, you have the Sith. And we completely forgot to bring up the fact that Darth Maul is introduced, several scenes back, but probably because he has a kind of a lame death. But it's it's a really cool concept. I kind of like the idea of the Sith, that they, as far as Sith training goes, there can only be two, the Master and the Apprentice. I think another thing that is a missed opportunity with this film, and then for the rest of the prequel trilogy, is that Darth Maul could have been a great bad guy to be around for the entire trilogy. It just seems like a waste of incredible character design to get rid of him. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of fun when, he's talking with Palpatine on Coruscant and he's saying, like, finally, after 1,000 years, we're going to reveal ourselves to the Jedi and, show them what they've all been missing, all this time. But yeah, it's definitely something that we'll talk about more as we get through this trilogy, about maybe the sort of controversial take that Lucas had on the Jedi Order, that they aren't these really great superheroes that are infallible, that they're actually kind of a outdated way of looking at things, basically, of using the Force.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of thinking about the Jedi that were implied in Yoda's training. I mean, it almost makes you think, like, he says, luminous beings are we, not this crude matter. unless you don't have midi-chlorians, in which case, fuck you.
Hey, you know what? Yoda had some growing to do on Dagobah. That's my take. You know, the Yoda that we meet in the original trilogy is not the asshole that we met in the prequel trilogy. And he, 900 years didn't really give him all the wisdom that he thought he needed, you know? So yeah, and that's kind of like my whole take with that entire Jedi Council scene is that, you know, from Mace Windu onwards, like these guys all seem like a bunch of arrogant assholes that are like not willing to see past their own perspective. They are not open-minded at all. And, you know, that's a reason why I think Qui-Gon, I don't know, maybe we'll talk about Qui-Gon when we talk about Count Dooku in the next episode. But yeah, I do wonder a little bit about what his intentions were, like what kind of visions of the future he was seeing and what moves he was making to see that future come to fruition. So after Coruscant, we go back to Naboo. We have a big showdown. It's pretty spectacular. We've talked about in the previous episodes how each new episode adds a new element to the climax, you know, a new kind of side story that's influencing what's going on in the rest of the climax. And this one is a very complicated one. There's a lot going on at the end of this film. And it's really a feat of storytelling and a feat of editing that this thing actually comes together the way that it does.
It's your typical, you know, Star Wars ending, right? Where lots going on. We're following 3 or 4 different scenarios. And kudos to Lucas and his editing team for being able to weave all that together and actually not lose the audience, because you can very easily lose the audience if you have too much going on at once. But Lucas is so flawless in his ability to be able to present, you know, 4 different scenarios and let it be fluid and not lose the audience attention. I think it's a feat in his ability to be a great filmmaker and a storyteller. I loved it. This, once again, I've been, this is the word of the day, the phrase of the day, peak Star Wars for me. Well, that final sequence.
Yeah, in A New Hope, we have just one storyline. In Empire, we have 2. In Return of the Jedi, there are 3. And then here we have 4. So there's like Anakin's in his starfighter, Amidala's in the throne room or in Naboo. The Gungans are down on the surface of Naboo. Then you got the Jedi with the Duel of the Fates, you know. So there's like 4 different things going on, and you have some rising action where everybody's kind of like setting up and they're having their first triumphs, and then there's this great down moment where Qui-Gon dies, the Gungans are being rounded up, and like Amidala gets taken to the Viceroy, and things look, you know, kind of in jeopardy, and then they kind of rise back up and our heroes triumph at the end. As I was saying before, that there's kind of a rhythm to this movie where there's just beat after beat. It picks up there in that third act. It's just like, you know, one storyline will kind of like do the emotional work to set up the next one. It's good stuff. There's a lot of fun going on there.
Yeah, I think it's actually like just a remarkable feat of storytelling. And I'm going to hold off on what my perspective is on how the Attack of the Clones ends, but I do feel like this movie benefited from having a longer period for Lucas to develop the screenplay. I think that he was working on it in the early 90s, and, you know, he had a good, you know, few years to really set this up, and it shows. I mean, you can say what you want about the dialogue and the performances, but the storytelling in this movie is it's really something. You know, it's weird. The execution of it is very weird, but he's taking a lot of risks on this movie that he didn't need to take. You know, this is Star Wars. He could have just coasted and, like we said, make Return of the Jedi Part 2, but he didn't do that, and really deserves some credit for that. So the film ends with Palpatine getting his way. He's elected Chancellor, and you know, his plot is set in motion. I love the moment where he says that he's going to watch Anakin's career with great interest, which is a little creepy. But it's also kind of funny that he has a moment where he tells Obi-Wan, you know, thank you for your bravery. He's got to be sitting there like, oh my God, I spent so long training Darth Maul, and you just cut this guy in half. Like, he's got to be a little bitter about that. But, you know, of course he can't show that.
I mean, to Palpatine, you know, like, Sith apprentices are like disposable, right?
Yeah, that's what I figured.
It's like, well, he didn't make the cut. I'll send the next one at you.
No pun intended.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so and you know what, and before we move on to other things, I just wanted to bring up Palpatine one more time because again, I think that he's very central to this trilogy. He's obviously the central antagonist to the film. He affects the plot and the characters more than anybody else in these these three movies. But just kind of going back to the role that he plays in this film, I think it's interesting that he's the senator from Naboo who's using the Republic's dysfunction and weakness of his planet's leadership to his advantage. And he has like no interest in representing his people at all. He's just basically this political hack that is, has no interest. Like back when, earlier in the film, when Amidala is like, it's clear to me that, the Republic no longer functions. She's very cynical about it. And he's like, yeah, I know it. And it kind of sucks. But hey, I might be chancellor. Like it's a very interesting take. And I don't know. As I get older, I appreciate his character so much more.
Yeah, Palpatine is a glorified bureaucrat, and bureaucrats don't get elected; they get chosen. They find their way into the system by kissing butt to the elected officials, or manipulating situations so they could get to a position of power. And that's exactly what Palpatine did. He essentially pulled the Hitler. That's essentially what he did.
I don't know. Palpatine had some interesting ideas. That's all I'm gonna say. But, okay, so let's just before we move on to the awards and demerits, we've talked a lot about the making of this movie. Have you guys seen the documentary, The Beginning?
Yes. I years ago though. The only thing I remember from that documentary was how he scolded Spielberg for touching the droid.
He doesn't. I just watched it last night. He doesn't really scold him. It's a cute little scene of the two of them just talking about just basically hanging out like a couple billionaires do every now and again, just talking about how they can do anything they want, and Lucas can just make this crazy big elaborate sci-fi film with his own money. It's what's remarkable about the documentary is how revealing it is. And when I watched that film as like a 14 or 15-year-old back when the DVD came out, that was probably like my first, maybe the first thing that I'd ever seen that like kind of went into detail about the making of a movie, like covered the entire production of a film. And I bought all of the books about the making of the Phantom Menace back when the film came out. This was the first movie that I ever did that with. So a lot of what the very beginning of me learning about filmmaking pretty much kind of came from the Phantom Menace. And it really is. If you guys haven't watched it in a while, or if you've never watched it, I strongly recommend watching this documentary. It's like an hour long, and it's just kind of a really intimate look, a fly on the wall perspective of the making of the movie. And this film is interesting just for being basically coming from one mind. He wrote the script, he came up with the money, he had no pushback. There aren't a lot of examples of that in movie history, and to have this sort of like unprecedented access to the making of something like that, it's in a lot of ways it's maybe even more valuable than the film itself. I strongly recommend it. It's great. It's a great watch.
Yeah, I did watch that when the DVD came out, and at that time I was still in the kind of kid mode where you see stuff and you just go, oh, that's how that works. You go down to the movie factory, you build some spaceships, and they're just cranking these out all over the place. That's how that works, right? And 20 years later, I gotta say, like this has been my feeling about the prequels is that this was a really a big achievement from like a producer's perspective. Like the world building and staking out this universe that you're like, you're going to sell billions of dollars in toys in, or like you're going to invite other filmmakers and creatives to play in this universe. Like Lucas did a lot of work in building out like a durable universe that other people could take these characters and these elements and tell stories in. And I'd like to rewatch that documentary because I did watch it in circa 2001, and I just had no idea what I was looking at the time.
It definitely had a lot more meaning for me now because I haven't watched it probably since that time. And I was also just kind of blown away that, you know, there used to be a time when people would produce those things for movies. Like, it just doesn't happen anymore. Like, it doesn't seem like people really care enough to learn about the making of a movie, which kind of sucks.
Special features are really not like as much of a thing anymore, are they, with streaming?
No, not really, which sucks because that was the best part. That was one of the best parts of buying the DVD or the Blu-ray, is that you get to watch a 30 to an hour featurette about the behind the scenes, how it was developed, how it was done, the problems they had. And it's always great to, you know, pull the curtain back a little bit from time to time to kind of see what goes on behind the scenes of a creation of a movie.
Yeah, it kind of sucks too, because I think that, you know, for brand legacy, maybe you have like the folks at Disney don't really want to reveal the problems that they had making a film.
No, they don't. Disney is very, very like protective of their process. They don't like to show outsiders what their process is like, and I get that. I get that because they do have competition. You know, obviously, they don't want to give out their secrets. You know, their quote unquote secrets.
They've actually produced quite a bit of content on their home video releases for the sequel trilogy, and they're sort of fun to watch for somebody like me who just kind of eats that stuff up. But you really do get a sense that when you're seeing the creatives in those interviews, they're being held at gunpoint and being told not to say anything negative about the process. And so, when you watch something from back in the, you know, late 90s, early 2000s, where, you know, these filmmakers were willing to be very open about the problems that they were having, or even like a difficult actor and things like that, would never happen today.
Yeah, it sucks. That makes it more exciting to watch the film. Knowing the backstories of like certain scenes and certain famous scenes and what have you. Yeah, it's a shame.
Before we move on to awards and demerits, I just want to focus a little bit on the CGI of this film, because this is something that gets complained about a lot. But if you do watch some of the behind the scenes stuff and you just kind of, you know, engage with the film while you're watching it, it's sort of remarkable how much of this film is actually practical, how much of it is actually like spaceships that were built and miniatures. There isn't as much CGI in it as I think people remember. And there's also this misconception that this film just relied on CGI. Like, I don't know, no one was really doing their job. They're like, oh, we'll just splash some CGI in the, you know, post-production and that'll fix everything. Like, they had to invent all of that on this film. Like, none of this stuff existed before. It's, in a lot of ways, so much of it was ambitious because, you know, even Jar Jar, which, you know, I do agree is a bit of a miscalculation. There was no guarantee that was even going to work at all, that they were even going to be able to put a CGI character into a film and have him interact with actors. So I don't know. I think that it's one of those toxic fan things to throw out, like, you know, oh, I hate all the CGI. I love when Star Wars used to be practical. Like, there's a lot of practical stuff and a lot of innovation that's happening in this film, just as much as the original trilogy.
Yeah, the all blue sound stages are kind of like later in Attack of the Clones or Revenge of the Sith, right?
Yeah, and there's some of that in this film, but the thing is like every Marvel movie is shot that way now.
Oh yeah, but that's, you know, that's 20 years after, you know, so that it's evolved tremendously since then. But you're right, though. Once again, when you're ahead of the game, a lot of the time you have to deal with the limited resources, and Lucas had to deal with that. And, you know, as opposed to, say, like a James Cameron who actually waited for the technology to catch up to his idea when he produced and directed Avatar. Maybe Lucas should have done the same thing, but I think at that point he just wanted to make another Star Wars movie, and why not? And you know, I'm glad he did. I'm glad he did because I still enjoyed episode 1 anyway. I can't say the same for episode 2 or 3, but I'm happy that he did because it kept Star Wars alive enough where he was able to sell it, and then now we get not just a new trilogy but also TV streams, which I think the prequels would have done better now if they were produced today as a Disney Plus show.
And I think for just kind of the sake of what's coming with Disney, I do think that a lot of what they're designing these TV shows to be is that they're kind of filling in a lot of the blanks of the original trilogy, the prequel trilogy, and kind of propping them up and making them better. You know, Joseph, you mentioned the Clone Wars. You know, just a silly kids cartoon makes me appreciate the prequels a whole lot more. It does a whole lot to kind of expand that story. And and it uses the aesthetic of the prequels to tell the story. And when I go back and rewatch the prequels, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm in Clone Wars era. Like this all looks like Clone Wars to me, especially like Attack of the Clones, which is like almost an animated movie because everything's basically CGI in that film.
Yeah, Julius had mentioned earlier that if it's not in the movies, like to him, it doesn't have that weight. It doesn't matter as much. But I've been kind of expanding into the expanded universe stuff a lot more lately, and I've been wondering if that kind of skews my perception of the feature films, because like it does flesh things out a lot more, and stuff that if you just watch the movie, you went, why did that character do that, or why did this happen? Then you get to watch like a whole season of TV that explains it. I mean, it changes your it changes your perception on it. And like any stuff that might have been a smudge in the movie can be like fixed later.
Yeah, and that's definitely something that I'm always kind of like jumping back and forth with, from my own perspective when I'm consuming Star Wars content, is that when I engage with the movie on its own, I can't bring to it my knowledge of the broader canon when I'm just trying to engage with the film itself. Even if there is something later on that clears something up that was sort of I was unsure of with the Phantom Menace because of maybe some problems in the storytelling. Just because you retcon that in a future thing doesn't mean that the problem is gone. You still watch that thing and you're like, okay, this still doesn't really work on its own. And I do agree that with the Phantom Menace, there are a lot of things that will get cleared up in future future elements of the canon, whether they're books or films or TV shows. But it doesn't take away from the fact that there are issues there inherent to the original thing. So is there anything else that you guys want to say about the production, the behind the scenes?
I do. Even though you mentioned, I actually did not know that they actually have more practical effects than they did CGI, because I always felt they had too much CGI personally, and I think that kind of hurt the prequels too. Is the fact that he didn't find a good balance. Like for instance, The Mandalorian had a good balance of the two. Had some practical and some CGI when they needed, and I think that's the right amount you need in order to keep the aesthetics of Star Wars alive, which The Mandalorian did beautifully. Because that's the only Star Wars universe show where I watched it and went like, this is Star Wars to me right here. No Jedi, no things that I recognize except The Mandalorian. But the fact that Jon Favreau and company were able to keep the recognizable features of Star Wars intact, I think that's what helped the show tremendously. And I think that's what Lucas should have done or could have done in the prequels, was to kind of keep the aesthetic kind of intact for this prequel, because the prequel seemed too fresh for me, too new and sleek for me. Where the original trilogy, since it takes place 20, 30 years after the prequels, it's kind of like maybe he could have figured out a way to kind of regress the technology of Star Wars to make it look like it's something before the original trilogy. I don't know if I'm making sense or not. It just seemed like everything was too new and advanced from the original trilogy.
Right. And that's one of those things that I've heard that complaint about the prequels so many times, that like you have these state-of-the-art props and ships and visual effects. But I actually think that what Lucas was trying to do was give you a contrast to the used universe of the original trilogy by having a sort of new universe with the prequel trilogy. But yeah, you do have that issue where you're dealing with much more advanced special effects that really make it feel like, oh, it's weird to. That's why, again, watching the prequel trilogy and then watching the original trilogy, it's not fun to do. I hate watching the movies that way. I think the first time I watched 1 through 6 in order, I was like, this is a drag. I hate this, and it's way more fun to finish the original trilogy and then engage with the prequels as a continuation of that, regardless of what the episode numbers say.
Yeah, because the Phantom Menace is way more of a sugar rush than like A New Hope is. Like it's slower pacing. It's just slower rhythm. I think it's kind of a like one of the, there's something in every shot, as Rick McCallum would say. But I noticed that was like a huge change going from the original trilogy to the Phantom Menace was that there simply is just more. There's just more everything. And it sets a different tone.
Speaking of Rick McCallum, if you guys could ever find somebody in your life that looks at you the way Rick McCallum looks at George Lucas, never let that person go. Okay, guys, you ready to move on to awards and demerits?
Let's do this.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, best ship or vehicle, Joseph.
Amidala's ship. I love that ship. It's sleek. It's chrome. It's inspired by 50s cars. It still tracks that through line directly from American Graffiti and THX. It's very sleek, and it's a huge contrast to the original trilogy look.
Yes, it's beautiful. I love that ship. I completely agree. So shiny and so chrome. Julius, what'd you get?
I chose Anakin's pod racer.
That's my choice too.
Yeah, I really like the design. I liked how it felt like you're watching a small race car compete with a bunch of big, large race cars. In that pod race scene in Tatooine. So that was my choice for best ship or vehicle, because I thought it was pretty cool, and the fact that even though I wasn't a big fan of his age, but the fact within the confines of the film, an 8-year-old or 9-year-old anyway, was able to build that was still impressive.
Yeah. I don't think I was able to assemble a peanut butter and jelly sandwich when I was 9. So that's pretty impressive. Okay. Best weapon, gadget, or tech. Julius, what'd you get?
Oh man, Darth Maul's lightsaber.
Same.
I mean, when I saw that trailer for the first time, and you see him, and I was like, whoa! It blew my mind. I was like, how is he not going to cut himself with that thing? And it was just amazing. Apparently, that idea came from a comic book. I think Dark Horse was, I forgot what Star Wars comic book they're producing, but of course, they had to ask Lucas permission, right? For anything new they introduced, they had to ask George Lucas for permission. And so I guess the writer of that comic book created the double lightsaber, and Lucas, he loved it. He loved it and was like, yeah, go for it. Let's use it. And then when the trilogy, the prequel came out, he took it. He took it for himself. And now,
that's mine now.
Yeah, that's mine now. Exactly. So, yeah, great. That's a great weapon, man. I love that weapon. I wish they didn't kill off Darth Maul. He should have stayed. He should have been a major staple throughout the whole trilogy, in my opinion.
I also picked the double-sided lightsaber because, and going back to that trailer, which if you were a kid or a teenager growing up in the late 90s and you saw that trailer for Phantom Menace and that lightsaber ignites, it blew my fucking mind.
It was dope.
Okay, I guess I interpreted this question a little differently, but I thought it was really interesting that at the beginning, when the Trade Federation invades, there's this really distinct, like, the film really shows distinctly that you have the control ship, and then the landing ships come out of that, and then the troop transports come out of the landing ships, and then the battle droids come out of the troop transports, and it's like very like directly shown, like one after the other,
like a Russian nesting doll.
Yeah. Totally.
That's a good choice.
And speaking of droids, best droid, Joseph, what'd you get?
Unfinished C-3PO was a really cool variation on that character.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, some people are like, oh, so like this one this one droid happened to be built by Darth Vader, but it is what it is. Like, you gotta have the droids in every episode, right?
It's also space fantasy. I love the fact that R2-D2 is introduced as the one little droid that saved the Queen's ship, and and you're also like you're as the plot moves, you're picking up these classic characters and being introduced to them and where they came from, and this is the thing that's going to link those two droids together at some point, and then they're going to be inseparable from that point on. Julius, what did you get?
I chose the destroyer droid, man. Those droids that have the shield around them. That I thought that was so cool when I first saw them, and the fact that they were the only droids that the Jedi could not fight against, which I also loved. And it's like, yeah, you gotta have something a little stronger to go up against the Jedi, so that way they have a nice strong nemesis, so that way they're not invincible, right? They can still have to run away, or retreat, whenever these destroyer droids come. And they have a great design too. I love the way they look. I love the fact they roll. they roll
Yeah.
and they get into
They
place
extend,
and they
yeah.
just start shooting at you. It's really cool. That was my favorite droid in the movie.
Yeah, I also I'm glad you brought that up because it is something that was really interesting to me seeing the film for the first time, introducing that the Jedi have limitations. And again, I think this is why you need to watch the original trilogy first, because if you watch the Phantom Menace, you're like, what is all of this? Like lightsabers and Jedi, you know, but you don't know anything really about the Jedi from the original trilogy, and now you're learning it through the prequels. And I do like that was kind of my first indication that the Jedi aren't superheroes. They're not like Superman, you know. They can be killed, you know, and all you need is a couple of destroyer droids and the right circumstances. And yeah. So I picked the pit droid that kicks Jar Jar in the nuts because he had it coming. And because it's funny, and I like the pit droids. They're actually like they're really cute and they're really fun. I also really loved the Three Stooges pit droids, the one that do the little routine when they're about to do the pod race. But yeah, that was my pick. Best alien or creature. I'll go on that one first. I got the giant fish in Naboo. I think they're really cool. I don't know. I love in this film that it just has so much stuff going on that there's also a chase by these huge fish creatures that, you know, there's always a bigger fish. There's always, you know, the little one and then the bigger one and the big one comes in at the end. It's really cool design. Really liked it. Joseph, what'd you get?
I liked Watto. I thought he was a cool character. He's flying around, you know. He's got his like floppy nose.
You know, he's not bad. I know he's a slave owner, but like he's not that bad a guy. He's all right. You know, he's a hardworking guy on Tatooine. He likes to go to pod races.
Look, a lot of people owned slaves back then.
Exactly, right? You know, why should we single out Watto? What'd you get, Julius?
Like you, the giant fish monsters, but I chose the last one that ate that big fish that was chasing. It's called the Sando Aqua Monster, and I wish this monster would have played a role in the end of the movie during the battle of the droids and when they joined forces, the underground, not the underground, but the ocean creatures. I don't know what they're called, the Gungas.
The Gungans.
The Gungans, yeah.
The thing that Jar Jar is.
Yeah, they're from the ocean.
Yeah,
right?
From Oto Gunga. Yeah, those are the Gungans.
Okay, yeah. Gungan, yeah, Oto Gunga. Yeah, so yeah, the Gungans. I wish it would have played a role in that in some form or fashion. Maybe the droids attacked them in their city in the ocean there, met them there as well. You know, as opposed to land. It would have been cool. I don't know. I really like the way that creature looked, and I wish I would have seen more of him.
So basically, the climactic battle between the Gungans and the Trade Federation, like when things look the grimmest, you have this fish comes in like a kaiju and just like stomps all over the Trade Federation.
Yeah.
Maybe they didn't have the budget for that, but that would have been cool. Like it's like, oh, I'm also a land creature. Cool. I could come in and I'm like, 1,000 feet tall or whatever.
Yeah, you guys are destroying my home. Assholes, I'm gonna destroy you.
You're destroying my fish food, like I eat these Gungans. Stop shooting them. Okay, best location or planet, Julius.
Oh yeah, Oto Gunga. I've always loved a big. Once again, I'm a sucker for ocean cities. Like I always love ocean cities. So Atlantis in the Justice League cartoons, and also in the Marvel comics, which is ruled by Submariner, and anything to do with ocean cities, I'm all for. Like The Abyss, for instance, the movie The Abyss that James Cameron directed. Love that. So Oto Gunga was definitely. I was like, wow, that'd be kind of cool if I could go to like an ocean city. That'd be tight.
Yeah, I'm actually really happy that you chose that one because it was kind of on my radar. I really love the design of it. Again, it's just this is a movie that's filled with ideas, and the design of that city is incredible. I love how they swim there and they go through the little shield that then brings them into the bubble city, and they're now they've got oxygen and air, and I don't know, it's a really cool concept and idea. I love it. What'd you get, Joseph?
I would include that in my answer. I just chose Naboo in general because it's a great addition to the Star Wars universe, and we haven't really seen somewhere like this in the original trilogy up to this point. And it's kind of like channeling the natural elements of like Yavin 4 or Endor, but with more civilization. It's like it's got an active civilization, which kind of represents how we're in the the High Republic, or like the old Republic.
Right.
You know, Theed is beautiful, and then also Odo Gunga, I didn't know that name up until now, is really inspired location that has like its own little internal logic, and it implies this whole little world down there that's really cool.
I picked Coruscant because I like cities and I like city planets, and if I was going to live anywhere in the Star Wars universe, I would want to live on Coruscant. I probably wouldn't last very long, but
I would imagine the rent being tremendously high in that planet.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Kind of like New York, San Francisco prices, I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
A lot of those high-rise apartments that we see in the future episodes, like Anakin's, is just, that's what I want. I want to be the chosen one. I want that apartment on Coruscant, overlooking the Jedi Council that I'm going to go massacre later on.
It's kind of funny that like Coruscant is kind of like Star Wars's take on a cyberpunk city or something like that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
You know, apparently they were Lucasfilm was developing a like a spin-off TV show before they were sold to Disney. And I think it was called Star Wars Underground, and it was supposed to take place on Coruscant and kind of like the sort of seedier underground areas of Coruscant, which is like, why do we not have that? They were developing a game that was also going to like be kind of this immersive multimedia experience with the show. And I don't know. I hope Disney is figuring out something to do with that, because I would love an open world Coruscant set, Star Wars game. Just sounds like absolutely my jam.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Can you imagine like a GTA style game? That'd be dope.
Yeah. The only problem with something like that is that I will never leave my house again.
I know, right?
I would only play that forever, and that would be the rest of my life.
Yeah, that'd be cool, man. Like it could be one of those games too where you start out, and depending on what you do and the actions you take, you can either become a Jedi or you can become a Sith.
Oh yeah, I'd be a Sith immediately.
Did you guys play Knights of the Old Republic? Because that is kind of what we're talking about here.
Oh, really? I've heard of that, but I never. That's a PS4 game?
It's a PC game.
Yeah, they had it for consoles too. But like some part of that game, you're on Coruscant and you're going like in through the city and doing missions and stuff, and your character is force sensitive, and based on the like decisions you make and who you kill or don't kill, you can tend towards the light side or the dark side, and that has impacts on your character.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, I got the game when they re-released it for iOS, and I played it on my iPad, but I don't know.
How'd that go?
It was kind of hard to play, and it was really outdated, but I've heard that I think they might be remastering it because it's a classic game. It's one of the most, I think, celebrated video games in general of all time.
Yeah, like outside of Star Wars, it's considered a classic. Yeah.
So I would love for them to do like a polish on it and re-release it on like a PS4 or something. I'd play the shit out of that. Okay, most satisfying kill or death, Joseph.
I feel like I should say Darth Maul, but actually I thought Qui-Gon's death was the one that kind of had like the most just narrative impact. Like I said, it's kind of like the start of this downbeat moment in the final act, and it like there's a big setup for it, and it hits, and it's like supported by the music, and it's this big moment.
What'd you get, Julius?
The same. I chose the same, Qui-Gon Jinn. Yeah, he I'm sorry that he didn't make it to the trilogy. He should have stayed, I think. But I think Lucas chose that he needed to go because Obi-Wan needed to train Anakin and kind of fail him because Obi-Wan is also a bit immature in this episode. He's not really he's not known as the Obi-Wan that we know in A New Hope, which was wise, old and wise. Yeah, I understand why he killed him, but yeah, that was my pick for most satisfying kill or death was Qui-Gon Jinn because he needed to go. He needed to go in order to push the plot forward.
Okay, so I was thinking about this while watching it, and I really don't think there is a very satisfying kill or death in this movie, unless we're counting like the many different ways that battle droids get killed. So I decided to demerit this with least satisfying death, which is Darth Maul, and we talked about this a little bit earlier. It isn't just the fact that they killed off such a great villain, it's the way that they killed them. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't the way that Anakin dies is because Obi-Wan has the high ground? Doesn't Darth Maul have the fucking high ground when I don't think it makes a lot of sense in terms of continuity that Obi-Wan like jumps out and Darth Maul, who's a pretty great warrior we've seen throughout this sequence, just kind of watches him jump up over him, land, looks confused, gets cut in half, and he's like, what just happened? How did this thing that I could have stopped from happening happen? And I don't know. It's something that I can't excuse.
Agreed.
When Obi-Wan is like hanging and he's starting to like pull the lightsaber towards him with the Force, and Darth Maul looks down at him as if he's like, well, I've got this like person completely cornered, because it's not like he's Force sensitive or could do anything like weird, like jump up or grab a lightsaber. So I've got him right where I want him. Wait, what is he doing?
Yeah. It's like he's stopping to take notes or something, like, oh, this is an interesting move. I'm gonna write this down for the next Jedi. Oh wait, shit, I'm cut in half. It's very, very bizarre. But it is what it is. And I think Lucas will recognize the mistake that he made, because, they're going to retcon it and bring Darth Maul back in not only in TV shows, but in future movies. So I don't know if I buy it. I don't know if somebody cut in half can survive, but it is Star Wars and he's from a different planet. So,
you would think a death like that would be as definitive as could be. Again,
I don't know why somebody didn't tap Lucas on the shoulder and say, hey, this character design is a little too good to leave in just one movie. Like, what are we doing here?
And it also would have been great if they kept him for the trilogy, so that way perhaps Anakin kills Darth Maul and takes his place as Darth Vader.
That would have been very interesting. Also, apparently in the George Lucas outlines that he wrote for the sequel trilogy that he gave to Disney, and Disney was like, cool, thanks, George, and threw them in the trash, Darth Maul was actually going to be the bad guy of that trilogy.
Oh.
Which, look, I don't know if that would have worked, but I don't know. It's interesting.
It worked for the Clone Wars animated show. And I had no idea until a friend of mine pointed it out to me, and I was like, wait a second, Darth Maul's in the Clone Wars, series? He's like, yeah, check it out. And he sent me the video on YouTube of how he came back. And when I saw it, I was like, that makes sense. That actually is good. That works. Like, damn, they did a great job. So kudos to the writers of the Clone Wars animated show. They did a great job bringing them back.
I think when I was at my most cynical as a Star Wars fan in the late 2000s, I had heard about the return of Darth Maul, and I think that I just laughed and I was like, well, that figures, and then just like forgot about it for 5 years. But no, I'm down with it now. I've watched the episodes. Darth Maul's cool. Okay, best Force move, Julius.
Qui-Gon Jinn using it to cheat in a betting game.
Living up to the high standards of the Jedi that we think of. Yes.
Yeah. And it was like, you know what? Screw it. Do it, Qui-Gon. He was doing, because he wanted to save Anakin. He wanted to get him out of his slavery state. So I thought, hey, why not visit some gray area to get what you need, which is to save the boy and train him and make him a Jedi, so that way he could potentially come back and probably liberate the people of Tatooine.
Now, if you're Watto and you meet this middle-aged bearded man who desperately wants your underage slave boy, that's got to be
right.
weird.
Maybe, well, since he's a slave owner, he's like, well, I don't care. He probably is a slave owner too, for all I know.
Joseph, what'd you get?
Right at the beginning, like 7 minutes in, like when the droidicas are shooting at Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, they just kind of like force run away. And I thought that was cool, because I believe there isn't a move like that in the original trilogy. So like right from the start here, it's like, no, these characters are at the height of their game, and they're like fully utilizing the Force to be like kind of superheroistic.
It kind of is used in Empire when Luke escapes from the
carbon.
Yeah, when he like leaps and you see like this little flash of him leaping out of of that hole. So it's not the same, because he's not running, but it's the same kind of speed, I would say.
Yeah, it's yeah. And there's more jumping like that in the Duel of the Fates too.
Right.
Yes,
right.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
So I picked basically the same thing that Julius did, but just in a broader sense. Just Qui-Gon betting everything on Anakin's skills really paid off. It got them off the planet. It got the chosen one for him, and everything pretty much worked out. But I mean, aside from like little Jedi tricks that we've seen before, this didn't really introduce any like new Force move that was done in a way that was mind-blowing, at least for me. Supporting character most deserving of their own spinoff. Joseph, what'd you get?
In Disney's endless quest to reveal the backstories of more and more characters, I feel we've reached the point where we're at that C tier level where it's now Captain Panaka's time to shine. We need a 7-season, 25 episode per season story arc detailing the full backstory of Captain Panaka and how he came to be the Queen Amidala's security captain.
That would be great. And I also want to know like why, he was just suddenly like fired and he didn't show up in Attack of the Clones. Like,
maybe the Phantom Menace was that one last job before retirement for him.
What'd you get, Julius?
I actually got I don't know if I'm pronouncing this character's name right or not. Is this Sabe?
Is this one of the handmaidens?
The Queen Amidala's double.
Oh, okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah, the reason why I chose her is because, well, first of all, it's Keira Knightley, and I think maybe, why not?
Bring her back, yeah, new canon. Let's do this.
I thought it would be cool just to kind of see how she got the gig, or if she was friends with Queen Amidala, were they like, did they grow up together, or I don't know. I guess that's just, I thought it'd be kind of cool just to see like a quick little 5-episode miniseries about how she became Queen Amidala's double and how she's actually maybe trained military, in the military setting, because she is supposed to play the role of the bodyguard for the queen, right? Like the head bodyguard.
Or, what could also be interesting is to have her character like show up, 10 years after the fall of the Republic as like a member of the, rebellion trying to carry the legacy of Amidala.
Oh, there you go.
And if you get Keira Knightley to do it, like, hey, great. She is a working actor still. She's available. I'm sure she'd be maybe down to do it. So probably not.
Yeah. Yeah, probably not.
All right. Best character overall. Joseph.
Qui-Gon.
Yeah, mine too.
He kind of fits the like old Obi-Wan, like the wise guy who has to die and so that the hero can go on and come into their own. And he's making moves. He's influencing dice rolls and he's
making moves on Anakin's mom.
Yeah.
No, that's right. That's right.
He's having adventures. He's out there.
Yeah, he sure is. He's got great presence too. Like he looks iconic with the beard and the robes, and he's such a tall actor. You got Oscar Schindler playing a really amazing Jedi in your movie. Like, yeah, he's great. I love his character. I love the performance. He's definitely my number one. Julius, what did you get?
Darth Maul for me. I actually, now that I think about it in hindsight, he should have been the character I chose for spinoff, because I would love to know his origin. I would love to know how he got in touch with Palpatine. How Palpatine found him. But yeah, Darth Maul, I thought, has so much potential.
So much.
He could do so much with this character. And it just boggles my mind that they decided to kill him off in this episode. And he could have killed him off. They could have waited until episode 3 to finally kill him off, because he has such a menacing look to him. You just looked at him, you're like, oh crap, like, oh man, I'm in trouble now. And they just wasted it, which is a shame. But he was my favorite character, even though he has like a few lines. His facial expressions, the makeup, and the fact that Ray Park was a great athlete, being able to spin around and jump around and actually use the lightsaber to great effect. It was just a full package for me, and I loved that character. He was the best part of the movie. And that lightsaber duel of fates. I mean, it's a classic for me. I can still watch it over and over again, and it doesn't get old. It never gets old for me.
I definitely agree, and God, we've brought it up many times already that it is just one of those things that is just absolutely mind-boggling. I don't understand why they killed this character off. And maybe the idea was that you were going to introduce a better villain in the sequel, but that certainly did not happen. So
no, that didn't happen.
and not like, no offense towards Christopher Lee or Count Dooku. I have a lot to say about the actor and the character when we get to Attack of the Clones. But to have like a very young and athletic actor who can really pull that off instead of, Christopher Lee's CGI body double, like it's not the same. And it's a real letdown. Okay. Best quote, Julius.
And you, Skywalker, we will watch your career with great interest. That was the best quote from me.
What a creep.
Yeah, that was the line when I saw it in the theater for the first time. That was the line that got people not cheering but going, well, like that. And we're kind of murmuring around the the theater, which was funny. I thought it was funny that they did that.
Yeah, that's one of the lines that really killed it at the screenings for sure. What'd you get, Joseph?
Always remember, your focus determines your reality. By Qui-Gon.
That is a really great line. Especially earlier, he says, concentrate on the here and now. Qui-Gon's definitely the kind of guy that uses like the meditation apps, I'm sure, on his phone.
Yeah, I heard that on Headspace.
Yeah. I picked something similar. I picked concentrate on the moment, feel, don't think, use your instincts. May the force be with you. I just remember the first time I saw the movie and like that moment of Qui-Gon saying "May the force be with you" to Anakin, and I think it might be the first time somebody says "May the force be with you" in the Phantom Menace. I might be wrong on that, but yeah, it's just an iconic line that's used in a way that's philosophical in that fun Star Wars way. And Qui-Gon's just chock full of little great little lines of dialogue.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for those little Star Wars nuggets of wisdom.
For sure. Okay, peak Star Wars moment, Joseph.
I like that they echoed the Death Star blowing up with the droid control ship blowing up in this episode. I thought that was definitely like hey, we got some explosions.
It looked good. Yeah. I love how the control ship, and a lot of those the Trade Federation starships they kind of look like if you took a Star Destroyer and a Death Star and kind of melded them together, you'd end up kind of with something like that, a kind of like open donut with something in the hole. I don't know. It's a cool design. It does look like it kind of will anticipate what's coming later with the Empire. Julius, what'd you get?
That opening sequence with Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan trying to get to the Viceroys and seeing the Jedi in action for the first time, in Star Wars, like full on. That scene, man, when Qui-Gon stabbed that door and he's letting the lightsaber kind of melt the door off, that was that's what I wanted in Star Wars. I wanted to see the Jedis at their peak, kicking ass and all that stuff. So that was my peak Star Wars moment.
Yeah, I picked the Duel of the Fates. You've got I think the best new track on a soundtrack that has a ton of great music.
Oh, yeah.
And I almost picked the pod race because I do think that's like a very, very close second. But yeah, that Duel of the Fates, just the way it's choreographed and everything, it's very beautifully done, and it's also everything that I think we've ever wanted, from a Star Wars movie. Like that, I think is, a huge payoff after years of waiting to see the Jedi in action. It's great to see, the three of them, going at it during that sequence.
Yeah, when I'd watched the original trilogy, I think the showdown between Obi-Wan and Anakin was kind of what I was always thinking of back in the day. But really, like, compared to the Mustafar fight, this Duel of the Fates fight is like way more fun.
Well, I have some thoughts on that. We'll wait till Revenge of the Sith, but yeah. Okay, let's move on to final thoughts and personal rating. Joseph, you go first.
I'm gonna give this one an 8.
Wow.
Yeah, I guess I hadn't watched The Phantom Menace in like 15 years.
Wow. Hey.
I watched it a lot when it came out in the years after, but then I wasn't sure what movie I'd be coming back to, and I have to admit that it's a lot stronger than I gave it credit for when I was younger. It's not the original trilogy, and it's not the original feel of the original trilogy, but it's a very strong exercise in world building, and there's a lot of interesting stuff here, and it could have been a lot worse.
Yeah, that's an 8 is high, but
it is high.
I do think I don't know. I do think it kind of deserves it. But Julius, what did you get?
Yeah, same 8.
Wow.
Yeah, I gave it an 8 because it still holds up. Like I said, it still holds up, and even though it's not aesthetically Star Wars, as we know in the original trilogy, but like you mentioned earlier, James, George Lucas was trying new things out, and I'm a big proponent of that. I'm a big proponent of artists taking risks when they want to do something a little different from what they did, what got them to the dance, essentially, right? So I have to give Lucas respect for that because he tried something new. He took a risk. It didn't pay off exactly the way he had imagined or he had hoped for, but that's why I still give it an 8. And that's probably the highest I'm going to give the prequels for episode 1.
Well, we'll see. I'm kind of blown away by this because I always thought that I was going to be giving these movies a much higher rating than you guys. But I gave this movie a 7, and I thought I was actually being really generous. And I'm shocked that you guys gave it an 8, and I'm actually kind of glad because I do think that, you know, I was kind of going back and forth between, you know, a 7 and an 8 while I was watching it. And then, you know, I'd see Jar Jar and I'd be like, no, this is like a 5 or a 6. And then I'd see the pod race. I'm like, no, maybe this is a 9. And
Right.
I think by the time I got to the end, I kind of settled on a solid 7. But no, I'm glad that I think just, you know, in terms of, you know, this show and what we're trying to do here with sort of reevaluating, you know, the Star Wars canon and also, you know, reevaluating these prequels. Like, I don't think that the prequels are sacred, but I do think that they are a lot better than their reputation would suggest. And I think that this film itself, like if somebody were to tell me the Phantom Menace is their favorite of the prequels, I think that's a very valid point. You know, it's still the one that I think is using a lot of practical effects. It's still shot on film. It's the one that feels a lot like a Star Wars movie. And, you know, things are going to get a little bit more brutal and clumsy as they go along in you know, episode 2 and 3. But no, I'm glad to see that you guys somehow like this movie more than I do. I feel seen, you know, it's great. So that brings our average to a 7.6. So yeah, guys, we're a lot higher than IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes and those places. So yeah, that's pretty great.
That's strong. That's still good.
All right, guys, I think that about wraps things up for The Phantom Menace. You can find more episodes of Star Wars Breaking Canon at breakingcanonpodcast.com. You can follow us on Twitter at SWBC Podcast. If you want to support our show, please rate and review us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts from. On the next episode of Star Wars Breaking Canon, we'll be discussing 2002's Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. Until then, thanks for listening, and may the Force be with you.